you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but
I will.
I've always I always admire the way that you kind of if there's something going on in the CrossFit space that's a little controversial, like you'll pop in and you give your 2 cents. You're like, hey, that's what I think. I'm out. If I put you in charge, of sport, let's just say it's you're king for a day,
Okay.
and you had some things that you wanted to fix or change with the sport. What would be one or two things you'd be like, this is non-negotiable. This has got to happen. This to get to where we want it to be.
Okay. So I am the czar for the day for
Mhm.
CrossFit, and I'm in charge of the sport. And what do I want to do? And I have unlimited power across the sport. Okay. I think you would ask this question. I think you see back in the day, CrossFit was very grassroots and it was well attended. The community was awesome. It still is awesome, but the community was even better because the people that competed in the high end of the sport usually owned the CrossFit gym and were involved in the community. And I think what you see now a lot of, and this is not, I am going to say a statement that doesn't necessarily is not a blanket statement, but definitely could be applied to certain situations. And that is, I think you're missing out on the fact that the only reason we have the CrossFit Games is because of CrossFit affiliates. I think that is missing on a lot of people that compete in the sport, a lot of younger athletes. No fault of their own. They have been raised differently in the sport because they haven't gone to an affiliate. Whereas, how do I find CrossFit? On a military installation, being invited to go to an affiliate. Did I coach and get my level 1? Absolutely. Rich Fernie owned a gym. Everyone owned a gym back in the day, except for me. And so like everyone was involved in the foundation of the sport. When you look at the fitness pyramid, sport is the top. And it's not meant to be the CrossFit Games in sport. It's meant to be sport, meaning take your fitness and do other things, tackle games, Spartan race, high rocks, whatever. But like when you look at it in actuality, you can really break that thing down into if CrossFit Games was the pinnacle of the sport, the affiliates are the base. Because if you don't have the affiliates, you don't have the sport, because the sport is subsidized by the affiliates. And so if I'm in charge of the CrossFit Games, I am bringing, whether it be value or notoriety or help back to the affiliates that needs to be done. I don't know if that's, hey, you know what, Sean, I'm sorry I raised your rate from 500 to 4,500 for annually. We're going to bring it back down. Or, hey, we can't do that, but instead I'm going to bring this value to you in terms of masterclass stuff that you can sign up for, where I bring in people to watch videos. There are a lot of ways to bring affiliate owner value, and I think it needs to be brought back to that. And that's what's missing in this sport, in CrossFit as general, not as a sport. So,
Yeah. No, I think there's something to that. And I've talked about this with other people. I remember back in 2012, 2011, like you worked out alongside the people that were trying to go to regionals, and then you would go and watch them compete at regionals. And then if you went to the games, like, hey, Matt Chan was at my L1, or like there was that connection. And like you said, I don't think it's anybody's fault, but the sport just evolved to where it got more professionalized, and that connection somewhere got, I don't want to say severed because I think it is still there, but it's been lessened.
yeah, it's been lessened. I mean, Chris Spieler gave my level 1. And so, by golly, man, I watched videos like I met Chris Spieler, like he gave me a level 1, and then I got to go compete with Chris Spieler. Freaking dope. And so I think what people expect is as sports become more professionalized, NFL, whatever the crap, they change. And the CrossFit Games, I'm not in charge of finances, but in my mind, the CrossFit Games is never going to be able to subsidize itself. It cannot afford itself. It's always going to be subsidized by something else. And which is fine. But because of that very reason, because it can't afford itself and become in the black, therefore, you have to give credence back to the fact that it is there because of the affiliates. And that's not being done very well, whether it be for leadership or private equity that currently owns that doesn't understand it. I don't freaking know. If and when CrossFit gets sold by whomever or whatever, that is a sport that I would love to go work for, because I think a lot of us, myself or Rich or Annie or those guys are probably a little bit higher than me. But in terms of names, I am only in the position I am in because of this sport, but not even sport, because of CrossFit. I have to clarify that. That's the only reason I'm on this podcast. That's the only reason we're having this freaking podcast. That's the only reason I know who Sean Woodland is, or John Woolley, or Jacob Heppner, or whomever, or Scott Panchik. And if I have the opportunity to give back to that sport and say, okay, let's get this sport the next level, by golly, I'd freaking do it in a heartbeat. Right. And I think that's also what's missing from the sport or the CrossFit in general, the methodology. They have perennial athletes that would give their arm and a leg for the company, that would do it in a heartbeat, but they don't take advantages of us and they don't use us, and we're almost ostracized. Not ostracized per se, but oh yeah, you competed. That's all you were good at. There are a lot of people who compete in that sport that are amazing businessmen and women or are good at something else, whether it be public speaking or finances or whatever the case may be. And so they need to take advantage of the fact that people who grew the sport in the beginning would love to help out in
Yeah.
the future for whomever buys it.
Mhm.
Adrian Conway is a great example of like,
Yeah.
dude was a competitor and now just like you guys, great at talking through events and going through broadcasting. And I love it because of his background, because of your guys' background, you can do what you can do.